Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to today's vodcast on the structures and functions of the flower. So first thing we have to know is that the flower is a reproductive structure of an angiosperm, and there's two main sections of a flower. And a flower could be one of three things. It could be a male flower, it could be a female flower, or it can be a flower that contains both male and female structures. So let's review what those male and female structures are. The first part that we're going to talk about is the male structure, and that's called the stamen. The stamen is easy to remember that it's male because the word is spelt with M-E-N at the end. So it actually spells out the word men. So if you can remember that men are males, then you'll remember that stamen is the male part. Now, as the male part of the flower, the stamen's main job is to produce grains of pollen. And pollen are structures that contain the sperm cells for the flower. So the goal is to get the sperm of this flower into the eggs of another flower, or maybe even the same flower that the sperm was made on. So to take a closer look at what pollen looks like, we'll take a peek at this picture here. Now this is a picture of a bee that's obviously been hunting for nectar or food out in flowers and been walking around in them. And as you can see, there's a bunch of yellow spheres located all over the bee, stuck in its fur and so forth. This is pollen. This is what pollen looks like up close. So those are the pollen structures of a flower. Now the pollen of a flower is produced by a structure called the anther. And the anther is this structure here at the top of this thin stalk. And this thin stalk is called the filament. And the filament's main job is to support the anther, to hold it up. This way the wind or different agents of pollination like butterflies and bees can bump into the anther and get pollen all over themselves. So pollen can easily be dispersed. So the anther and the filament make up the male structures of the flower, which is called the stamen. Now when the pollen is being transferred, it's going to end up on the female parts of the flower. And the female parts of the flower is called the pistil. And the pistil includes the following structures. We have the stigma, the style, the ovary, and then inside the ovaries we have our ovules. So we'll start at the top of the stigma. The main structure of the stigma is to collect the pollen. So when the pollen is brushed up against it by a pollinator, or through the wind, the pollen grains are going to stick on the stigma, and then the pollen grains will release the sperm cells on the stigma there. And we'll take a closer look on how that happens later. Now, the sperm cells released from the pollen on the stigma now move down this long, slender tube going deep inside the flower, and this part of the flower is called the style. The style is the tube that connects the stigma to the ovary. And then when we get down to the bottom of the style, we have this rounded structure called the ovary, and the ovary's main function is to contain and protect the ovules. Now you might be wondering, well, what's so great about the ovules? Why do they need protection? Well, don't forget, the ovules are the female parts of the flower, so the ovules are going to house the eggs that are needed for fertilization.